Welcome to the Multimedia Podcast. In this episode, I speak to Eleanor Harding, who is currently working as a senior product manager for Twitter in London, and she's also a multimedia graduate. I think the episode speaks pretty well for itself, so without further ado, let's jump right in. So I want to start out by saying thank you so much for making time to join me. I'm really excited to chat to you. I think among everyone that I've studied with, you are the one that's considered like the rock star of multimedia because because of everything you've done. So I'm really keen for you to share your experience. So if we can get started with you just sharing a little bit about how you got into your career. You started as an intern at Team Geek, if I'm correct about that. So maybe you can share about that experience.
Yeah, of course. It's really lovely to chat. I'm keen to share all of these experiences. You're right. I kicked off my career with an internship at Team Geek. I was probably in my second year of university when one of my friends, Gerard, that I studied with as well, he got a job as an intern at this place called Team Geek, and it just sounded incredible. At the time I was working as a photojournalist at Bay at the newspaper, and I really enjoyed like doing something as a side thing. And so when I heard from Gerard about Team Geek, I asked him if he could introduce me to Ryan Brosseau, who was running Team Geek. And so we met up for a coffee, and he then hired me as a design intern.
Okay.
And I was doing like a couple hours a week, doing like whatever needed to be done, like designing social posts, like helping Hilda, the other designer, to do websites, like all sorts of things. And I just loved it. And then by the time I got into my third year, I was spending more of my time there. So I was like doing both studying and doing the part-time work. And then I did my multimedia degree over like 3.5 years. So in the last like 6 months, when I was just doing like those last 2 really difficult cos modules, I was spending almost like more time at Team Geek than I was at university. I was like doing mornings at Team Geek and then afternoons at Tux, like going between both of those. So by the time I graduated, I had a full-time job at Team Geek.
Yo. Can you speak a little bit about what it was like studying and working from second year? Because I know a lot of people don't do that. So how did that go?
Yeah, it was tough to like manage time. I mean, doing 2 things is like diverting your focus completely. But I wasn't doing too many hours. I was definitely like doing an intern. I think we had it at something like 10 hours a week. So it wasn't that much. What I did find really useful about it though is like seeing the direct application of the stuff that we were studying. So we would like learn about something, and then I would like immediately see, okay, this is how it translates to like what actually happens in the industry. And so that was really cool. But like clearly, I mean, I tried to do too much and then ended up doing my multimedia degree over 3 years and 6 months. But like that was fine. It worked out well.
You're fine now, so it's not really. It feels like it's such a big deal in the moment, but I think like down the line, it's not a big issue really.
Exactly. Yeah.
And the design work you were doing there, you didn't do any coding. Was it mainly just front end design sort of things? Or?
Yeah, I was doing more design stuff because that was the stuff that I really enjoyed. But like Gerard, for example, was full on engineering. He was writing code at Team Geek. So that just happened to be like how we ended up specializing. I was doing a bit of front-end code, writing a bit of like HTML, CSS, but I did more design because that's what I really enjoyed doing out of everything that we were trying.
Okay. And then since then, I've taken a look at your LinkedIn profile, and I think you've gone through too many jobs for us to speak about all of them. So I was hoping you could maybe pick out a few defining moments, things that stood out to you, things that were cool, where you learned some lessons. Yeah, whatever you want to chat about. That'd be cool.
Yeah, sure. I stayed at Team Geek for a while, and then I decided to go to London. I'd always had my eyes like set on going to London, just like spend some time there. It felt like London was this like tech hub in Europe, and I just really wanted to go spend some time there. So I moved to London. And I mean, you asked about defining moment. There was this like one week that really stands out. I was doing a lot of hackathons when I first moved to London because I knew no one. And it was a really good way to like get to know people, like try and hone my skills in building stuff a little bit. And so I went to this hackathon that was the NASA Space Apps Challenge.
Yeah.
And I absolutely love space. Like, I'm obsessed with it. Our third year game was based in space. Like, my house is full of planets. I have a telescope just out of frame over there. Like, I love space. And so I spent some time at that Space Apps Challenge. We built a physical board game, which was loads of fun. And we ended up winning the People's Choice at that weekend. So I felt amazing because we'd won the hackathon. And I'd also met someone there called James, who was running the Open Space Agency. So like, picture a space agency that's focused on like doing everything open source. Absolutely incredible. So I met him and I was like, I want to work with you. You sound amazing. In the following week, I'd been tweeting a lot about space, and someone from Al Jazeera saw my tweets, and they then asked me if I wanted to interview Chris Hadfield, who was like commander of the space station for 6 months.
What?
So I did this interview with Chris Hadfield like the week after we'd won NASA Space Apps. And then the day after that, I had this interview with James and I got the job. And so I started working with James on the open space agency, and worked on like some amazing projects. Before I arrived, they'd created like a zero gravity whiskey glass with Valentine's, and that was just incredible.
Wow.
And the project that I really loved working on there was this open source 3D printed asteroid hunting smartphone powered telescope.
Wow, that's a lot of words.
A lot of words. Yeah, and I worked on the stuff. Have I got you?
Yeah, we're
just
back.
Got a phone call there that just interrupted the Zoom call for a second. So we were working on this telescope, and I worked on creating the user interface for it and coding the interface for it just using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And that was incredible.
Wow,
and the biggest moment for that, they took the telescope to America and took it to the White House when Obama was still president. And it was like on the lawn in front of the White House at like a science day. And that was just incredible, amazing feeling.
Yeah. Wow. That's a cool story. Anything else that stands out before we move on to your current job?
The things that stand out during that time were all the hackathons. Okay. I was doing a lot of like work with startups and then doing hackathons over the weekend. And through those hackathons, I would like meet new people to work with and like new projects to go and work on. And it was just such a like exhilarating time because you're spending so much time like trying out new ideas and meeting all sorts of new people. So that was really like the highlight. I really enjoyed doing that kind of stuff.
Okay. And those hackathons, were you primarily involved in the design, maybe a bit of front-end coding, that sort of thing?
Yeah, that sort of thing. I think the beauty of hackathons is that you can really do anything. Like you can show up and be like, this weekend I want to try doing some like database stuff, and then just try it. Learn someone who knows how to do it and just figure things out with them.
Yeah.
I love that you can like try whatever you want to.
And I guess there's a lot of like room to fail. Like if you get it wrong and you don't win, like that's fine. You've just like learned something cool along the way.
Exactly. It's like super low risk, but very exploratory.
Yeah. Oh, that's really cool. So moving on to what you do now, as I understand, you're a senior product manager at Twitter, right?
That's right.
What does that entail? How does that actually work? What do you do?
Yeah, product manager is that kind of job that's really difficult to explain to your parents what you do. Everyone takes a really different interpretation of the role, but the core of it is your job is to work with people to realize ideas that help people.
Okay.
So it's three things primarily that I spend my time on. The first one is, we call it deliver for the customer. So your job there is to know which group of people you're targeting to try and help them, and like deeply understand what they need to be able to make progress in their like day-to-day lives.
Okay.
What are the circumstances in which they're encountering problems, and what do they need to be able to like overcome those problems? So you've really got to like know them inside out and be able to imagine what kind of solutions would be helpful for them, and then like speak to them and learn from them and validate that these things will actually help them, and then also give it to them. Okay. So it's like understanding people, building the right thing, and then delivering it and making sure that the software goes out into the world.
Sure.
The second part of it is facilitating for the team. As a product manager, you're kind of like the glue that holds a lot of different parts together. So you'll typically have like an engineering team of like 6 or 7 people, plus a data scientist, plus a user researcher, plus a designer in your immediate team, and an engineering manager. And then you're also working with comms, with marketing, with legal, with sales.
It's
So you've
all
also
good.
got leadership that you've got to work with. Make sure that you're building the right thing for the company and that you're moving the right metrics and really like making progress for the business as well. So it's a
Okay.
lot of like coordination with people.
Mm.
The facilitation in that sense takes place in like making sure that your team is running efficiently, using like agile processes, that they're not being like blocked by anything.
Mm.
If they need to work with other teams, like the teams are communicating clearly and like we're on the same page, and that leadership is well informed and that like we're working on the right thing.
Okay. So, sorry, you want to say anything else?
I have one last bit of what we
Go for it.
do.
Go for it.
So it's deliver for the customer, facilitate for the team, and the final thing is build a better company. So part of my role is also just like make sure that Twitter's a better place.
Okay.
Like make sure that you're focusing on the right work, but also improving the people around you. And the one thing specifically in that area that I work on is running a mentor program for all of the product
Oh, wow.
managers at Twitter.
Sure.
There are about 120 product managers across like the whole world. And so I really love like creating these connections between them and like building up relationships between them.
Wow. So maybe I don't understand this properly because okay, I'm not a big user of Twitter, but is everything that you do, does it end up on Twitter as we see it, or is it other side projects that the company does, or how does that work?
Yeah, every product manager in Twitter looks after a section or a customer group or like a
Okay.
different type of like area. It's hard to think from the outside that there are like 120 product managers working on it because it's from a customer perspective, you often don't notice when the changes happen because they're small and like they feel really natural and so they come across as quite invisible. The project specifically that I've been working on is TweetDeck, which is Twitter's like pro tool. So we build it for journalists and we build it for social media managers,
Oh, wow.
people
Okay.
that spend like all day, 12 hours a day on Twitter trying to like tell stories and build their brand. So we go for like the power users.
Okay. Okay. That makes more sense. So in a sense, your job is like like team manager combined with like UX designer combined with like all of these skills,
All of
designer
these things
and
in one.
understanding your audience and liaising between different departments. Sure. Okay. Sounds like a lot. But it sounds really like diverse. Like what you do every day is probably different on different days, I'm guessing.
You're exactly right. Yeah.
Okay. Sure. So how did you go about getting a job at Twitter? I'm sure everyone would want to know.
Yeah.
Like it's like Google, it's one of the top companies. How does that actually work? How does that happen?
Yeah, absolutely. When I was still working at Team Geek and I had my sights set on London, I just decided I'm going to get a job at Google. And I applied at Google and I got through to interview stage and did the interview and spoke to someone who had like created Google Maps. And I was just like, this is incredible.
Whoa.
And of course, I didn't get the job. Like I had maybe a year's worth of experience. I was still super junior. But that just like made me think like this stuff can be done, like it's doable to get there. And so I moved to London. I did some stuff for maybe a year and a half. And then I decided, you know what, I want to go and get a job at Twitter. I love the idea of Twitter. I think it's really powerful that it gives everyone a voice and just lets anybody speak to anyone else in the world. Like you can reach anyone. So I decided I wanted to get a job at Twitter. And then I mentioned earlier, I love doing hackathons. I was also going to a lot of like meetups and events to get to know people in London. Like I was still building my friend group. If you move into a brand new city, like you've got to do a lot of these things to get yourself out there and like get to know people.
Yeah.
And I started keeping an eye out for whenever there were events happening at Twitter. And so I went to one that was like Super Women in Tech, and that was fun. There was another one that was like a technical talks evening at Twitter. And in one of those events, I spoke to a guy called Andy Piper, who is one of the developer evangelists at Twitter. And he said, you need to speak to this guy called Andreas, who's on the TweetDeck team. And so I DM'd Andreas. I spoke to him a little bit over Twitter. And then about a week later, I tweeted, I'm going to go to this hackathon over the weekend. Who's going to join me? And he responded and he said, I'll see you there.
Whoa.
So on Saturday morning, Andreas showed up with his then girlfriend, now wife, Carolina. And together with one of my colleagues at the time, Antonio, we just built something over the weekend.
Yo, that's cool.
We built this like really cool travel app, and I just got to know Andreas and Carolina, who are now like really good friends.
Sure.
And through that, like Andreas said, apply for this job, it's open. And so I applied for it and I got rejected because they said, you don't have enough experience. And I was heartbroken at the time because I thought like the stars had lined up, but they hadn't.
Yeah.
And so Andreas just said, just wait and try again. And so I worked on my skills. I like tried to get the right kind of experience that I needed. And then 6 months later, the job went up again. Andreas messaged me, I applied and I got it.
Yeah.
So I was really, really pleased, landed dream job.
Yeah.
It was as a design contractor. So it was like a short-term contract, but within 4 months, I converted to permanent.
Wow. Sure, that's cool. So is it in the same team that you're in now, just obviously lower down? Okay.
Yeah.
And then from there, how did you progress to where you're at now?
Yeah. So I joined as like a mid-weight product designer. We call it like product designer 2. And where product designer is like a combination of user interface and user experience and like everything in one. And so maybe about a year and a half in, I'd been like working with a lot of teams in San Francisco, kind of representing design from London. I'd finished a couple of like really big projects. We redesigned all of TweetDeck. And I had given this like really cool talk that I was so proud of at Twitter Design Day, which brings together like all of the designers from around the world together in San Francisco. And the combination of those things meant that I got a promotion to senior product designer. And I was really, really happy with that.
Yeah.
And then at some point during my time on TweetDeck, I became really interested in the product side of things. Through multimedia, like you try so many different things, and I really enjoyed the design, but I love the idea of like product where you get to work with design and business and leadership and like all of these things.
Yeah.
And so I started doing like both at the same time, like both product design and product management, and then just slowly moved in that direction by like trying to focus on doing more of the stuff that I loved, and then just ended up being product manager.
Okay, sure. Sounds like such a cool journey. What's really cool for me is that you're very good at putting yourself out there. So you're just like, I want this thing, and I might fail, like trying to get there, but I'm just gonna try do the steps to get there. And if I don't, then try something else, and just keep meeting people and keep upskilling and learning more things. And just I think that's a really good skill to have in this day and age, definitely, but especially in our industry. So good job with that. I want to ask you, what's your favorite part of your job? Like, what do you enjoy most?
Right now, my favorite part of my job is just how incredibly supportive Twitter is being during this time.
Oh, really?
Like it's a difficult time at the moment. Like the world is locked down. There's a huge amount of uncertainty, and they've just been incredibly supportive. They immediately sent us all home to work from home before any of the lockdown orders were sent out.
Yeah.
They've given everyone $1,000 to like set up their own work from home environment. Yeah,
that's
it's
insane.
super generous. They put a really generous leave policy in place as well for anyone that got sick with COVID. And I was unlucky enough to pick up COVID myself in March, and they've just been so supportive through the journey coming back.
Wow.
So honestly, like that's my favorite thing about it right now. If you'd asked me while we weren't in the middle of a global pandemic, I would say there's this incredible feeling that you get when you ship something to like 1 million people that use it immediately. Like there is nothing as exhilarating as that, to know that like you're helping a lot of people immediately to like do their jobs better, to make progress in their lives. Like it's a really exhilarating feeling.
I think just to add to the first thing you said, it's something. I think it's hard for a company to get to the point where they care that much about their employees. And if you work for a company like that, it's almost like don't leave if you can, because it's rare, but it's also like you said, it's really special, and it makes you feel like you're actually like you're needed, I guess, and you're like a valuable part of this company, not just like some random human who's just contributing to making money. So I think that's it's really cool to hear that, actually. Didn't know that. And then something that frustrates you about your job, or that you don't enjoy particularly.
Yeah. I think one thing that we don't talk about enough in software is that only about half the stuff we build actually gets shipped, like actually gets sent out to customers. And it's this like quiet secret that happens all the time, but like no one really acknowledges it. Like if you zoom out and you look at like everything that's built in a year, and you think about like how much of that stuff actually went to market, it's like usually about 50%.
Whoa.
And that's because we ask the question of like, can we build this, far more frequently than we ask the question of like, should we build this? What we're trying to do is make people's lives better to help them make progress. And we try to like measure that by finding the right metric that tells us that we're succeeding in that or not. But moving those metrics is so difficult. you have these hypotheses that you think, okay, I can see that need, and I think I can solve that by doing this thing. And so we're going to build it and then experiment with it and test it and then use that like measurement to know.
Yeah.
But so frequently, like you think that the world works in one way, but there's so many other factors that come into play that it just doesn't do what you first thought it would do.
Sure.
And so there's a huge amount of like trial and error, and you're making informed decisions, but even so, like recognizing that not every single thing you build is going to be shipped.
Well, I can imagine that could be quite demotivating, I guess, in a sense, if you have a few of those in a row, or you've worked really hard on something and then suddenly it just doesn't work, not exactly the way you expected. Yeah,
especially as a product manager, like if you count out like how many people touch a product from like idea to market, you've got like researchers that are thinking about it, designers that are conceptualizing it, engineers that are building it, like data scientists that are informing it. You've got quality assurance engineers that are like testing it to go out. You're working with comms that's coming up with a plan, with marketing, with a way to explain it, with like loads and loads and loads and loads of people. And then when you get to the point that it doesn't work out, you've got to like let everyone down. You've got to say like, listen, this didn't work out. And that's just a really difficult, but like that's part of the job. That is like a reasonable chunk of it.
Wow. Okay. Can we move on? I want to hear a little bit about how your multimedia degree specifically has helped you. Parts, if there are any parts that stood out, or whether you found the degree worthwhile in what you do now.
Yeah, I'll start by saying, I mean, I'm biased, but I found it completely worthwhile. I think it's an incredible degree. Honestly, the bit that I like most about it is how varied it is.
Yeah.
I think for someone who's like 17, 18, trying to decide what career they want to go into, I think that's really difficult without like knowing exactly what's available out there. I knew vaguely that I wanted to do tech, and I knew vaguely that like I really like creating things. And so going into multimedia and it just giving me this platform to like try loads of stuff, I think is the most valuable thing. I think like what we did, like coding, we did like video creation, there was like website building, there's publishing, like there's so many different things in there, and you can try them and see which bits of it you really enjoy doing most.
Yeah.
And more importantly, like you build up this muscle that teaches you how to learn stuff. And I think that's the most valuable part of this. Tech changes so quickly that the people who are studying multimedia today are going to be doing jobs that don't exist yet.
Yes.
And the theory that we're learning now it might be outdated in a few years' time. So I think the skill that it gives you is like, you can learn how to learn anything.
Yeah.
And then when you need to learn that new technology, you can, because you know how.
Sure. Yeah, that's super valuable. That's my opinion as well. Definitely, you don't just go to university for 3 years and think, this is fine, I'm done learning now. You it just basically teaches you a whole bunch of conceptual skills that you leave with, and maybe, a little bit of code along the way, but the rest of it is just like, you've sort of changed your brain a little bit so that you can survive and keep learning the rest, I guess. Now, I understand that, or at least from what I've seen on Facebook, I think of you, is that you've been involved in some women in tech things. You mentioned one earlier. Can you tell me a little bit about that? And also just your experience. I don't know if this is the case in your company. Maybe you are outnumbered. I don't know. It is definitely in the multimedia degree. There's a lot fewer women than there are men. Maybe you can speak a little bit about that. That'd be cool to hear.
Yeah, definitely. I think it goes all the way back to high school. I went to Pretoria Girls High, and in grade 10, you've got to like choose what subjects you do through to matric. And I remember I really wanted to take IT as a subject. I also wanted to take business, and I wanted to do woodwork to like have something to do with my hands. But none of those were available at the girls' school. So they weren't even like options to choose. And I was really upset about it at the time. I ended up taking IT as an 8th subject after hours at the Afrikaans boys' school, which was really difficult because Afrikaans is like, it's not really my first language. So learning how to code in like a language that I'm not really that comfortable with, like that was really difficult.
Yeah.
And it just like, at the time it makes you feel like, well, maybe I'm not supposed to be interested in this stuff if it's not available. But I did it anyway, and I fought a bit with Girls High, and it's now a subject. So
good job.
The girls after me could do it, which is great.
Yeah.
And then at Tux, like you mentioned, I was totally outnumbered along with you against all the guys in the class. Like we would be in, my friends group was like 5 guys in Eleanor. Like that was just normal. And breaking into the industry as well. Like this kind of stuff is just, you really notice it and you see it.
Mm.
When I was at Team Geek, we started like all in one open plan office, and so you don't really think about it. But later we moved into a new place where we had like 3 separate offices, like a dev office and a design office and like a meeting room. And all the women were designers and all the men were engineers. So where I had the skills to do both, I was kind of like boxed into like designing, which just didn't feel really good. Like I couldn't change the whole company being like a junior designer in the company. But when I quit and I moved to London, it was something that I just decided I was going to work on. I mentioned moving to a new place, you've got to like go to a lot of events. I was going to a lot of like women in tech events, a lot of like mentorship events. And at those places, like I've met my best friends.
Wow.
The people that I'm really close to in London now, I met through those networks. Andreas was really involved in this thing called Code First Girls, which is like a 8-week coding course that we run at Twitter every 3 months. And that one's probably my favorite in London. It focuses on bringing people, like teaching people how to code from different industries. So it takes girls aged like 18 to 24 in whatever industry you're in and teaches you how to code. 2 stories from that I love most. Katya was a nuclear reactor designer. What? And went through Code First Girls, learned how to code, and she's now a software engineer at Twitter.
Wow.
Similarly, Poizan, who's on the TweetDeck team, was an anthropologist who did a Code First Girls course and then went and did a computer science master's after that. And now she's also a software engineer at Twitter. Wow. It's incredible.
Yo, that's cool. So given that you're a little bit higher up in the company, do you feel like there's any, I don't want to ask about discrimination really, because we're not going to get into that, but has it been tough for you being a woman, not a man? Have you noticed that, or is it not so relevant at that level?
Yeah, what I love about Twitter is that they have these like inclusion and diversity transparency reports. Okay. And so you can like see at a company level, at an organization level, exactly what the like balances are. And I feel like, I mean, people say what gets measured gets changed. And so I really appreciate that that's something that's like actively worked on. Yeah. There's also this incredibly supportive group at Twitter called Twitter Women. And then there's also like Women. So all of these like groups of people that come together and support each other. Twitter is the place in my career so far that I found the least discrimination, the least like impact of my gender on my work. But through every other job that I've had in the past, it's always been a problem. Like it's always been something that you're aware of. It's always been something that feels like you have to work like extra hard to make progress in comparison to some other people. Okay. And I think part of that is also just like not feeling like you belong. Like if you're one of 3 people in a room of 100, you just like kind of question if you're supposed to be there. Yeah. And so I like ways of challenging that, and I like ways of making sure that people don't feel like that, and making sure that everyone's got that like fair advantage in this. Yeah.
Just one more question on this. If you do find yourself in a room of 100 people as one of 3 girls, what would you do? What tips do you have for people who are in those sorts of situations?
Yeah, just be confident enough to believe that you belong in that room, because you do. And the more people that are there, the more people will join you in that space.
Yeah, that's true.
I think the confidence in your ability is the key here. I remember in my first year, I was really doubting my abilities, especially in computer science. It felt like a lot of my friends were so much further ahead of me because they had done computer science at school. They'd been playing games much more than I had. Like they had started doing some computer science work already. Like one of my friends specifically, like had already done all of first year computer science. They were just so much further ahead. Yeah. And I just felt like I was really far behind. And I felt like I didn't have the right background, or I wasn't supposed to be there. And I was like, you know what? This is what I want to be doing. This is what I enjoy doing. And so I'm just going to keep doing the stuff that I love, not compare myself to everyone that's around me, and just keep moving forward in whatever I can.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good tip. Don't compare yourself to other people. Definitely helpful. So we've arrived at the last question, and this is just something I ask most people who've studied multimedia. Do you have any tips that you can give current students looking to enter your industry, but any industry really, as a multimedia student? Anything that you can say that you've learned?
Definitely. I would say never stop trying new things. I mentioned that that's my favorite thing about the multimedia course, is that it lets you try like a billion different things, that you could sort of see which ones you love most and which ones you're good at. There are going to be jobs that don't exist yet, which is a difficult question, or like a difficult topic to wrap your head around. And if you're not like constantly trying the newest and most interesting, like different thing that's out there, you're not going to like move forward as much, or you're not going to find that one thing that actually turns out you're really incredible at.
Yeah.
So my one tip for multimedia students is like enjoy the experience of trying all these different things that you get in multimedia, and then don't stop doing that once you get out.
Okay.
I think there's incredible value in exploring different industries and exploring different fields and ideas, and the creativity really unlocks when you bring bits of those experiences together. I think that's where the magic really is.
Sure. That's helpful. Thank you so much. Is there anything else you want to add just before we end?
Chris is a wonderful person who has been incredibly impactful on my career, and I think he's doing an incredible job with the multimedia program. I think he's had huge influence on so many people's lives. So my last thing to add would be a shout out to Chris de Beer.
Agreed. I will let him know to listen to this podcast so that he can hear that. Cool. Thank you so much. Thanks for joining us. I know you're probably super busy and all the way from London, but your insights have been so helpful and super encouraging and super inspirational as well. So, I mean, I'm inspired and I'm not even looking for a job. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Amy.
And yeah, it's been really cool having you.
Oh, it's my pleasure.